March 8th. The first race of the 2026 Formula One season has just finished in Australia, and something Max Verstappen and Red Bull boss Laurent Mekies said after the race is suddenly making the entire paddock nervous. Because on paper, the result looks simple. Mercedes dominates the Grand Prix. George Russell wins. Andrea Kimi Antonelli finishes second. And Max Verstappen only manages to recover to 6th place after starting from the very back of the grid. But here is the detail that changes everything. After the race, Verstappen and Mekies both hinted at the same thing. The Mercedes engine might already be operating in a completely different performance window compared to the rest of the grid. And if that is true, the 2026 championship could already be facing a huge power shift. Because the new Formula One regulations rely more on electrical deployment, hybrid recovery, and energy efficiency than ever before. And in Australia, Mercedes looked frighteningly comfortable with all three. So the big question after the Australian Grand Prix is no longer just who won the race. The real question is this: did Mercedes just start the new engine era with a major advantage, and did Verstappen and Mekies just confirm it? Because once you understand what they actually said about the Mercedes power unit after the race in Melbourne, the entire picture of the 2026 season starts to look very different. The context of what Verstappen and Mekies said only makes sense when you understand how important the 2026 regulation change really is. Because this is not a normal season. Formula One has entered a completely new technological era. The engines are different. The hybrid systems are more powerful. And the balance between electrical energy and combustion power is now one of the most important performance factors in the entire sport. In previous seasons, teams could rely more on aerodynamic efficiency to dominate a race. But under the new rules, the engine and the hybrid deployment system have become even more critical. Energy recovery under braking. Battery management. Electrical deployment on the straights. All of these elements must work together perfectly. If one part of that system is slightly better than the others, the performance advantage can be enormous. And that is exactly why the performance of Mercedes in Australia caught everyone's attention. From the very first laps of the race, their cars looked extremely comfortable. George Russell controlled the pace from the front with remarkable calm. Andrea Kimi Antonelli stayed close behind him, protecting the second position and allowing Mercedes to control the entire race strategy. Neither driver looked under pressure. Neither car showed signs of struggling with tire temperatures or energy cycles. The car simply looked stable. And stability is one of the most valuable characteristics a Formula One car can have during the first race of a new regulation era. Because while other teams are still learning how to manage the complex hybrid systems, Mercedes already appeared to understand exactly how their package behaves. Meanwhile, Red Bull entered the race under very different circumstances. Qualifying on March 7th created immediate drama. Max Verstappen crashed during the session and was forced to start the Grand Prix from the very back of the grid. 20th position. At a circuit like Albert Park, that is one of the most difficult starting positions imaginable. Overtaking is not easy. Traffic destroys tire life. And dirty air makes it difficult to follow closely through the faster corners. So from the moment the lights went out, Verstappen knew the race would become a recovery mission. And that is exactly what he delivered. Lap after lap, he began climbing through the field. The overtakes were clean. The strategy was controlled. And the pace was consistent. By the end of the race, he had recovered all the way to 6th place. Considering he started from the very back of the grid, that is an impressive result. But the gap to the leaders revealed the bigger problem. Even with a strong recovery drive, Verstappen finished more than 50 seconds behind race winner George Russell. That difference tells us something very important about the current competitive order. Mercedes appears to have started the new era slightly ahead of everyone else. Ferrari looked close behind. And Red Bull, at least for now, seems to be chasing. Inside the Red Bull garage, the situation became even more complicated because of the second car. Isaac Hadjar. The rookie had shocked the paddock on Saturday with an incredible qualifying performance, placing the RB22 in third position on the grid. But his race ended prematurely. A mechanical failure forced him to retire from the Grand Prix, bringing out a virtual safety car during the race. That retirement removed half of Red Bull's strategic options. Because in modern Formula One, two cars are essential for controlling race strategy. Teams use them to split pit stop timing, pressure rivals, and control the rhythm of the race. With Hadjar out, Verstappen was the only Red Bull left fighting for points, which made his recovery drive even more important. But the comments made after the race show that Red Bull is not only focused on their own performance. They are also paying very close attention to Mercedes. Because if the Mercedes power unit truly has an efficiency advantage under the new regulations, that advantage could shape the early part of the championship. And that is exactly why Verstappen and Mekies sounded both impressed and cautious when discussing Mercedes after the race. Not alarmed, not defeated, but clearly aware that the fight for the 2026 title may depend on how quickly Red Bull can close the gap in this new engine era. And what makes this situation even more fascinating is that Australia was only the first race of the season. Teams are still learning. Upgrades are already being prepared. And development speed will determine who controls the championship. Because if Red Bull finds performance quickly, the balance of power could change again within a few races. But if Mercedes truly started this new era with an engine advantage, then the rest of the grid may have a much bigger challenge ahead than anyone expected. But the moment that really triggered the conversation inside the paddock came after the race, when Verstappen was asked directly about the pace of the Mercedes cars. His answer was calm, but extremely revealing. Because instead of focusing only on Red Bull's problems, Verstappen pointed to something very specific: efficiency. He explained that the Mercedes looked extremely strong on the straights, but not in the traditional way people usually imagine. It was not just about raw top speed. It was about how the car delivered its energy. Smooth acceleration, consistent deployment, no visible drops in electrical power during long stints. And under the 2026 regulations, that detail is absolutely critical. The new power units rely much more heavily on electrical deployment than previous generations. Drivers must constantly balance energy recovery under braking, battery charge levels, and the timing of electrical boost on corner exits and straights. If a team masters that balance earlier than the others, the advantage can become very difficult to overcome. And in Melbourne, Mercedes looked extremely comfortable with that system. Their cars accelerated cleanly. The energy deployment appeared stable across the entire race. And neither Russell nor Antonelli seemed to struggle with battery management. That is exactly the kind of behavior engineers want to see from a new power unit. Meanwhile, Laurent Mekies made another interesting observation when speaking after the Grand Prix. He acknowledged that Red Bull is still learning how to extract the maximum performance from the new RB22 package. That includes the chassis, the aerodynamic balance, and especially the hybrid system connected to the new Ford power unit. Because this is the first season Red Bull is running this completely new architecture. And new architectures always require time to reach their full potential. The engineers must understand how the energy flows through the system, how the battery behaves during long stints, how deployment should be optimized for different circuits. All of that takes race data. And Australia was the very first opportunity to collect it under real conditions. But here is where the situation becomes even more interesting. Even though Red Bull clearly did not have the fastest car in Melbourne, Verstappen still managed to recover from the very back of the grid to 6th place. That kind of recovery is only possible when the baseline performance of the car is still competitive. The RB22 may not yet be the fastest machine on the grid, but it is clearly strong enough to fight inside the top group.